Okay, so we're recording. So the No Knowledge podcast, we've got Tommy McDarby on it, the great and powerful Tommy McDarby, business and law, and UCD.
I'll have you know that it's law with politics in
Oh,
UCD.
seriously.
I'll not have you paint me as some B&L bollocks. Because all of the B&Ls in UCD, with the exception of about 10, are absolute unqualified wankers. 90, no, probably not 90%. A very strong 50 to 60% of them are there on Drodu's money, and don't really care what happens to the law. They're not in it to fight for justice. They're there because hooray for money.
Yeah.
And
Well, that,
they're,
that that often does happen in business courses. People don't really want to do business or do law. It just kind of sounds like something that is a nice general course.
this is the thing with third level education in general, is that we're all sort of told we have to do it. That no one says when you're doing your leaving cert, sure, feck off to Indonesia and wash some elephants for a few years, get an idea of what you like about the world, and then start looking into it further. You're told, you're 18, you're grand, fire away, something will suit you. What's
Yeah.
for you won't pass you. And in fairness, I'm a very strong believer in what's for you won't pass you. And even if you end up doing a degree that you hate, you'll meet somebody on that degree, or you'll see something on that degree that's important to you, and you'll get a way of looking at the world during that degree. But at the same time, it's a bit shit that sort of, every third level student costs the government over the course of its education somewhere between €6,000 and €8,000. No, God, because it's 2,000 a year plus small change, isn't it? So it's
Yeah.
probably closer to about somewhere between 7 and 10,000 euro. Um,
You're
but
saying €10,000 over the course of 4 years,
yeah,
or
over the course of 4 years, because the capitation grant that the UCD or Trinity or UL or NUIG or GCU or UCC, or I've definitely left out some, and the ITs and so
there's a
forth.
lot of universities, but yeah,
There are, and that's brilliant about a place as small as Ireland, is how much, if you want to get an education, it's there for you somewhere. But in any case, they get somewhere in the region of 2.5, 2.5, two
yeah,
six a year. And my maths is dreadful. So 2.5 over 2 years is 5,000, which means over 4 years is 10,000.
yeah,
But that's what each university or higher education institution gets from the government per head, roughly. So it's a shame to see public money being put into something that's not as effective as it could be, is the point I'm getting at. If
yeah,
you feck off Indonesia and wash elephants for a year, and then all of a sudden discover from that. So let's say 17-year-old you is saying, I think I'd like to do architecture. And then you feck off to Indonesia for 2 years. You all of a sudden discover your love of investment banking whilst you're washing the elephants. You come back, and the government and your parents and yourself make a very effective investment banker out of you, and now Ireland has an investment banker instead of either an unhappy architect or a dropout architect.
yeah.
So it, perhaps sending sort of secondary school students abroad, or just to do something to let ideas percolate in the head, might be a good idea. There are countries. Sorry, you probably have questions that
No,
you
I was
want
just
to
going to
ask.
say that's a really good point because I was reading an article about George Hook recently, who I'm sure you're
Hmm.
familiar with. But he was saying that
George got
he was
himself into a
saying
lot of
that
trouble a few years ago.
there's too many there's too many college courses, and there's too many universities, and there's too many people with the ability to go to college. He was saying, for example, journalism. They've created a lot of courses. A lot of people are studying journalism. He said, when I was younger, that's not how you became a journalist. You'd go in and you'd go into the Irish Times, for example, and just hang around, not being paid, not doing anything like this, but just hang around other journalists. And then at some point, someone would say, hey, do you want to write an article? And if you did a good job, to get you to write an article, and all of a sudden, you're a journalist. Whereas now, everything you have to go to colleges to say, you know?
Well, see, the thing about some of these courses is that you'll do the course and you'll never look at that stuff again. Or so take journalism, for instance. I'd love to see figures. I think the busiest journalism course in the country is either in TUD or DCU year on year. And in fairness to DCU, they have huge apparatus where, you know, when you're leaving that course, and I'd say TUD is the same. I've never seen it. I saw it in DCU, but they have a huge amount of apparatus that they train students to use. And, you know, you can leave being able to produce and being able to sort of floor manage a TV show or a radio show through its lifetime. But the vast majority of them, I would say, beg your pardon, little burp there. But the vast majority of those people, I'd say, never work in journalism. You know, I'd say they then go on and retrain, because in Ireland, the jobs aren't there. And in, say, the UK or Canada or New Zealand, Australia, or someone is being better trained, or someone is better connected. So while the jobs might be there, the opportunities aren't necessarily. And I think that's a very important distinction to draw. So I'd be very interested to see figures from DCU as to sort of how many of their journalism students go on to work in journalism and how many become teachers. In my own experience, I know a few people who did the course, and only one of them is now working in journalism out of the 4 or 5 people I know who went to do it.
But that's a really good point, because just when you say that, I'd say there's more people who started, say, a WordPress, you know, blog type thing when they were 15 years old, stuck with it for 3 years, who became journalists, as opposed to people who went to college specifically and studied journalism. You know what I mean? Like, for all intents and purposes, I'm a podcast host. I didn't go to college to study podcasting. I just decided one day, you know what, I'm going to start podcasting, and all of a sudden have a podcast. So I think the best way with a lot of these things is not necessarily go to study them, but just start doing them, especially in the creative side of.
Well, I'd agree in part. I think the best way to learn anything is to do it, and that doesn't necessarily have to be limited to something in the creative world or the artistic world. Sort of getting a law degree. Yeah. I shouldn't inverted comma that. I have an awful lot of knowledge.
I mean, you literally are getting a law degree. Yeah, there's no quotes about it. Wouldn't you love to walk up to the Dean of Law in UCD and say, "Thanks for the law degree"? But in any case, sort of the idea of a formalized legal education where you go in and you learn the theory for 4 years is very new. It started in the sort of late 19th, early 20th century. Prior to that, you just decided, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer, and now I'm a lawyer. Well, not so much that, but you went and a bit like George Hook, you hung around other lawyers, you learned what it was all about, and then all of a sudden you were one, quite by accident. And I think that's sort of how life works in a way, outside of sort of the career thing. Is, you know, I didn't necessarily, as you know yourself, I'm sort of artsy-fartsy, musicals and theatre and drama and the odd gallery and so forth. But, you know, I fell into that because that's what my parents were into, you know, and I'd wager if my parents were into sort of GAA or badminton or some fun thing like that, fun. Some people have a very bastardized idea of what fun is. But in any case, if my parents or my close friend group were into sort of a Pell, I'd probably be an awful lot better at Pell. And poor Brendan Hayden wouldn't have had to try and cajole me into holding a come on. But in any case, I shouldn't call it a come on, I should call it a hurley. But you are the GAA expert. Maybe you can walk us through what the difference is. You're the Irish language expert, so you know, you tell me. But yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
That's an interesting point that you say, that you aren't necessarily just your personality. You're really what you experienced when you were younger, and that's going to shape you for the rest of your life. You know, what you experience as the 0 to 15-year-old child. Well,
see, then that's defeated by, you know, people who are genuinely black sheep in their family. Now, I'm a very white sheep in mine. Well, in my immediate family, I'm a very white sheep. But my sister, for instance, was into sort of basketball and all of that stuff. And I think that was basketball, and she played county now. But we frequently joke that playing county for Carlo, that, you know, with years training, I could play county for Carlo,
Perhaps,
which
perhaps.
is a very sad indictment of, of the state of the sport in Carlo Press. But no,
Yeah.
that's I shouldn't be talking shite about stuff that I genuinely know nothing about. But in any case, you know, Breed was sporty, and that wasn't necessarily something that came from home, but it did come, I suppose, from her immediate friend group in school.
That's the thing.
It
Like,
did
it doesn't
go into
necessarily have to be your friends, as they say. From the time you go to school, it's your friends who are raising you as much as anyone. And maybe
oh god.
when you were younger, did you fall into a group that was more artsy, as you call it?
John, when I was younger, I didn't fall into a group. I drifted between a lot of groups, some of whom were arty, some of whom were sort of God, I'm not going to get into my childhood with you because before you
Mm.
know where we are, I'll be crying. But no, in my early years, sort of, I was as much my own friend as anything else. Now I went to a very, very good creche, and they just sort of they let you do whatever. You know, they had a huge garden, and you just ran around, and while other people people made a soccer pitch out of one corner of it, and then the rest of it was all sort of massive garden toys. You know, so you'd be playing pretend. Again, that doesn't really get an inverted commas. You'd be playing pretend in the garden toys. You know, one day it might be a rocket ship, the next it might be a parliament. Rather unfortunately, we frequently held court. And I found myself being a lawyer in this court.
This was in the creche.
It was written in the stars. This is in the this is in the creche, and we
When,
rotated the judge. You know,
when
and
you were 3, 4 years, maybe 5 years old,
oh yeah, oh
Nice.
god, yeah.
okay, you had a court and you used to hold it, and lo and
Yes,
behold, 15
and
years later, you're studying
oh,
BLC.
no. So really and truly, Maureen O'Regan is to blame for Lord rest her lovely soul. But Maureen O'Regan and her excellent family and staff are all to blame for the dreadful lawyer that is now upon the world. Not that I am a lawyer, I shouldn't claim that. The dreadful law student that is now beg your pardon, I'll wipe your
And
nose.
did any of the other children who you held court with, did they go on and become lawyers in any capacity or study law?
So I've lost touch with so many of them.
Hmm.
And that'd be fascinating to know. I know at least one who hasn't.
Okay.
And beyond that, she went on to primary school teaching. But then she's probably a bad example because she was one of my 3 wives from that creche.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I got through my wives early in life. I wanted to get all of that out of the way. But yeah, she went on to primary school teacher, to be a primary school teacher. And then another got a good leaving cert and has been sort of working in odd jobs in and around Carlo since she didn't want to go to college. There's a curious amount of she's. Actually, one of them did, or he very firmly intended to. I haven't met him since hearing what he was putting on his CAO, and I should actually reach out to him. But he was going for economics, politics, and law in DCU. So I wonder how he got on.
It's a strange thing because I don't know anybody who I grew up with who became a lawyer, but at the same time, we never held court in the playground, whereas you did, and at least 2 of the group that you held court with have now done something law related. But
Yeah. Well, maybe our court was better than yours, Don.
But we didn't have a court, Tommy, so maybe that's the difference. But
Right. Sorry,
what we did, of
I
course,
misheard
well,
you.
like I suppose most young lads, was we'd be playing soccer. At break,
Well,
like everyone does. But the vast
in
majority of people who went to university, that I know, studied sports science. So it really, it's funny how it sticks with you. Those 2 to 3
mm,
early years
well,
through your life.
where you find joy, you stay there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my big thing was that I wanted to go to the Lair or to the Gaiety School of Acting, because it wasn't so much playing pretend as a lawyer as much as it was playing pretend in general, and perhaps a desire to prolong that by becoming an actor might have been. But I was talked into, and indeed I decided myself I like to farm the decision out to other people, but in fact it was as much my decision as anybody else's to decide to go with law, just because not that it's a little more stable. It's not hugely more stable. Certainly in certain practice areas of the law, there are much wealthier actors than solicitors or barristers. And by actor, I don't mean sort of Hollywood. I mean sort of, odd job here and there. Show in January, another show in.
Hold on, Tommy. You're trying to say that the actors are more wealthy than barristers?
There are some barristers out there, Don Colgan, who live from brief to brief, and will continue to do so for the rest of their lives.
Not from what I've seen, Tommy. Not from what I've seen. I saw a curious statistic.
I would like to put it respectfully to you that the vast majority of your experience with the law comes from probably land disputes or farming disputes. So your barristers get wealthy in busy practice areas. Does that make sense? So a lot of law in Ireland is farmers suing farmers. A lot of law in Ireland is family members suing family members, and companies suing companies. A lot less of law in Ireland is sort of human rights stuff and international law stuff. That comes up an awful lot less frequently. But they're also sort of the sexier areas of law, if you want. So people want to have a busy international human rights practice. Everybody wants to be, I've forgotten the name of George Clooney's wife, but everybody wants to be her. And sadly, not everybody can be. Now, part of me just really wants to come back to Carlow and settle down here and have a lovely country practice where I help farmers to sue farmers and help people make their wills.
And the big one, Tommy, personal injury claims. I saw there that there's a new law being brought in related to that. The judges are to adopt new guidelines, giving rewards for people with sore backs and whiplash and whatnot.
I think the days of money in personal injury are shortly coming to an end.
Yeah.
So
hopefully the sooner the better.
There is a growing sense of frustration among everybody that if you, for instance, fall off a swing, not thinking of any case in particular.
I was going to say it, Tommy. Maria Daly, she ruined it for everyone.
No, my dear. You should absolutely not name names on this. There's some free legal advice here. Don't ever name names. Don't let guests name names.
Tommy, I'm going to continue to name names in the potty, but if I need some legal help, I'll go to you first. So
we'll eventually name the name of a litigious fucker who will come after you for everything you've got. And even if that's only €2, they'll want it from you for the damage you've done to their reputation. And in fairness, I shouldn't invert commas that, because people,
real thing.
There are a lot of former auditors out there, I'd say, who had something published about them in the Observer or the what's the university? The
University Observer is the only one I'm aware of.
No, there's
definitely another one, but
that Dara O'Brien started and Conor Kaplis was an editor of. This is going to kill me. The Observer and
the Tribune, is that the one?
The Tribune, the College Tribune, that's the one.
There we go. I was paying attention in college, Tommy. I was paying attention.
Well, I was paying attention to my degree and not the college papers. But in any case, I'd say there are a lot of former editors or former treasurers who've had some negative press in the Tribune and are quite disappointed with that, because, the first result of their Google search might well be this dreadful article about how shit hit the fan with food sock 3 years ago, and then recruiters who do a quick Google see, oh balls, this guy can't run a student society, maybe we shouldn't let him run our firm, or we shouldn't let him run X File. and people
Yeah.
are being done a good job. So I suppose what I'm saying is people's reputations matter, and therefore don't name names on here.
It's
But
funny though, as you said, how high up the Tribune, the Observer end up in searches. Because I consider myself to have done quite a few things in life so far. Well, a few things at least, as a 22-year-old. But when you put in Donegal Colgan into Google, it's one university article where my name is mentioned. That's the first article. And if that
and
was a bad
worthy of
article,
both, boy.
it'd be lower for me, you know?
Oh, so it wasn't a good article for you then,
Oh
no?
no, no, it's fine. Like, but I'm
Oh,
saying,
fabulous.
if somebody, if the writer had a distinct dislike of me, that could affect me well into the future. Because for some reason, Google just brings up the University Observer and the Tribune as the first Google searches whenever possible.
Well, the life lesson there is to make friends with journalists and editors,
Yeah,
and try and suppress bad stories about yourself. Um,
most definitely.
but in any case, that's just something that we should all probably be aware of, is that, we'll circle back to personal injury in a minute,
Yeah.
because it isn't. But that,
So Maria Bailey, if you're listening, as I'm sure you are, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it, and I support you in your future ventures. Should
yes,
that cover me, Tommy?
you wish her best of luck. You retract anything that could be interpreted as lessening her standing in the eyes of right-thinking members of society.
Mm.
And you are a huge and staunch admirer of her public service, which has been exemplary. Now that's probably overstepping it a little bit. And in fairness, in general, if you're sitting on a swing, it might be a good idea to hang on to the damn thing rather than to hang on to a drink.
Yeah.
Um,
But her biggest
and
misstep was, she run a 5K a week or two after her swing incident, which really,
that's not great.
no, it didn't make for a good case.
Well, I happen to be of the opinion that very few personal injuries. That this is me doing myself out of a job, but I don't think a lot of personal injury claims have merit. There are genuine people who have had car accidents where other people have been idiots, and they've ended up with life-limiting conditions now. Those are the people who deserve, 5-6 figure payoffs. But if you're back dancing a week after your supposed life-changing accident, maybe we should consider whether or not your claim is vexatious. But in any case, I think people are starting to clamp down on that. I think attitudes towards it are changing. Now, it typically takes, a few years for public sentiment to be translated into law, but we're going to see that. So I think personal injury and general sort of, I don't want to say the entire law of tort is now dead, because it shouldn't be, and it isn't in reality. But certainly, personal injuries are on the way out as the cash cow. Not that they really are the cash cow that everybody makes them out to be. I mean, a lot of where a lot of lawyers get work now is in big corporate firms. Banks, being the lawyer to a bank or to a property company, or ideally a group of banks and a group of property companies and a few developers and a few multinationals and a few freight organizations. And a well-diversified firm is where a lot of people want to get work. The issue about well-diversified firms is a lot of them work their lawyers into the ground and willingly know that the stress levels, and it's a professional hazard that if you work as a lawyer, you're going to lead a very stressful life, and you need to make your peace with that relatively quickly. But your stress levels should never be at a point where they're causing you permanent damage to your health, and if they are, you need to take a look at how ethical that practice is. So a lot of larger firms, and I'm specifically not going to name names because companies can take an action in tort. Now, it's not quite defamation, but there is a version of defamation available to companies. So I'm not going to name any specific companies, but some of the larger firms in Dublin absolutely do work their solicitors into
Yeah.
a hole in the ground.
Absolutely. But
And
that could go for employees in general. Like any good private
oh,
company isn't concerned about the employee. They're concerned about profits and shareholders. So
which is a very bad way. Now, I'm not going to sort of sit here and make an argument for Marxism, but at the same time, I'm not going to sort of stand up and defend the world, the sort of the complex we have. People tend to look at the military-industrial complex in the US and sort of leave it at that, but there is a global industrial complex which goes far beyond sort of the military sector and sort of invades everybody's lives, and that's something we need to look at, because at the end of the day, people do need to be able to put a roof over their heads. And arguably, I have heard the argument convincingly made. I'm not sure I buy it, but I have heard the argument made that were it not for capitalism, we'd all still be shitting under bushes, which is probably not great. But there is definitely a happy medium to be found, and I'm not sure Ireland in 2021 reflects the happy medium.
although
And I'm not sure how. Go ahead, yeah.
I would argue that Ireland meets the happy medium a lot better than a lot of other countries. I mean,
God, yeah.
it's hard to think of a
would,
country who's doing it better. Like the UK are doing probably a similar job, maybe.
no, the UK is doing worse than us
You think
in
so?
terms of work-life balance. I think the US are the worst of all for it.
Sure.
I would never work as a lawyer in the US. I would work for an Irish firm in the US, but I would never work for a US firm, because again, you have to lead a life. And even if you're, and like you know me of old, I am a bit of a workaholic, and I do expect to a large extent that whatever I end up doing will become a massive part of my life. But if you can't get away from that, and if you can't sort of close the door on it and go and be on the beach with your family or with your pals, then what's the point of living at all? Even if your work is life-changing, and you're helping millions of people to escape persecution, for instance, at some point you do have to be able to take a little break, give yourself a bit of headspace, and that makes you more effective. And it's very interesting to me that we're a fairly buoyant economy, and as much as it's not a very popular thing to say, I think we did bounce back relatively quickly from the dreadful scenario we were put in 2008. And I think we're going to bounce back relatively quickly from this. And I think it's because in Ireland, people do get comparatively more headspace. I think if we got as much headspace as perhaps some of the Nordic countries, or perhaps I can't really pick out anything beyond sort of, and I'm loath to name a Nordic country, because there is surely one Nordic country that is a crock of shite, and I would surely name that one.
I always hesitate to name Nordic countries as well, because they tend to have a lot of natural advantages. In terms of Norway, for example, they've got the oil, they've got just more money coming in, and that's often a big difference maker. But